Amazing grandmother escapes her son-in-law's car after touching warning from my daughter. Margaret, a spirited 70-year-old, was not just anyone. She was a war veteran, a cherished grandmother, and a fierce embodiment of hard work and independence. Yet here she was, seated in Dave's weathered sedan, feeling trapped like a lion in a cage. The sun shone brightly outside, children laughed, and yet the air in that car felt heavy, thick with tension. "You need to consider moving to a nursing home, Margaret. It's not safe for you to live alone anymore," Dave insisted, his voice laced with misguided concern. Margaret felt fire ignite inside her, memories of her life rushing back. She had fought too hard to maintain her home, her independence. "I've taken care of myself just fine, thank you very much," she retorted. Wasn't independence the hallmark of her generation? But her words seemed to bounce off Dave, who looked down at her as if she were fragile. Just then, in the back seat, 10-year-old Lily, her bright blue eyes wide with innocence and wisdom, sensed the storm brewing. "But Grandpa," she piped up, her voice cutting through the tension like a sharp knife. "Grandma has always taught us to stand strong. Remember the stories?" Everyone quieted, the gravity of her words hanging in the air. Lily went on, expressing how family meant love and respect, how it was essential to honor the strength of their elders. Margaret's pulse raced. The way Lily spoke, so earnestly and bravely, reminded her of the values she cherished. This was not just about her, it was about family. Inspired by Lily's innocent bravery, she felt a surge of determination. Before she knew it, she bolted out of the car, declaring with a voice that echoed like thunder, "I want to be put in a box, Dave. I deserve my dignity." Dave stumbled in disbelief, an ungracious look on his face. "You think you can just walk away from this? You need help," he challenged, his tone rising to meet hers. The family stood in a stunned silence, tensions swirling, confusion erupting at the confrontation. The essence of who Margaret was, a symbol of resilience against the tides of age, shined through her fierce stance. All around them, expressions flickered like candle flames: shock, uncertainty, but also a dawning realization. They began to understand family wasn't about control, it was about respect, love, and dignity. Emotions crackled in the air, and amidst raised voices, tears were shed. But tucked away in that chaos, moments of laughter began to echo off the walls of their suburban home. "Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen." Now let's continue. As Margaret stood defiantly, she felt the air shift. Could this be a bridge for understanding? Could they come together despite their differences? With a heart pounding in her chest, her soul ignited with hope. Yet uncertainty loomed like a shadow over them. Would her family finally see the power of independence, or would they remain lost in their fears? The scene was set for a transformation as Margaret began to realize they could each grow together. What would it take to bring harmony back to their family? The tension in the air was palpable as Margaret stood outside the car, her heart racing yet steadied by a fierce sense of freedom. She had stepped out into the warmth of the sun, a stark contrast to the cold confines of Dave's sedan. The laughter of children playing nearby felt like a soothing balm amid the storm churning within her family. "Margaret, you can't keep doing this." Dave's voice rose, stretching over the distance like a taut wire. His frustration was evident as he pulled away from the vehicle, leaving the door ajar. The air crackled with an intensity that flickered between anger and concern. Lily slid out of the back seat, her small frame holding an unexpected weight of wisdom. "Grandma," she called gently, taking small steps towards her. "What if we all sit down and talk? Together? Like you show us." The little girl's blue eyes shone with sincerity, a beacon in the harsh sunlight. Margaret felt her heart soften at Lily's request. The child's confidence reminded her of the time she gathered the family around the dining table, telling stories rich with history and life lessons. Yes, they needed to talk. It could mend the invisible rift that had formed around them. "All right, sweetheart," she finally replied, her voice steady but laced with exhaustion. "Let us go inside." As they each moved towards the home, Margaret caught sight of glances exchanged among the family. The weight of the moment began to lift slightly, but still, she sensed the underlying currents of fear and misunderstanding that ran deep within Dave. Once inside, they gathered in the cozy living room. Sunlight poured in through the windows, illuminating the pictures of happier times: birthdays, holidays, and family get-togethers. Margaret refocused, calling on her strength. "Listen," she began, her voice firm yet gentle. "I appreciate your concern, Dave. I do. But I'm not ready to give up my life. You and I need to work together, not against each other." The sincerity in her eyes held a mirror to his. Dave's expression softened as he processed her words. "But I just want what's best for you," he said, and for a moment, the protective layer around his heart began to crack. "I don't want you to feel like you're alone or in danger." Margaret met his gaze directly, a soft truth lingering in the air. "I've fought too hard to be independent. And whether I live in my home or a nursing facility, it doesn't change my spirit. You need to trust me." The atmosphere shifted. Silence enveloped the room, surfacing the unspoken fears lurking beneath the surface. Lily stayed close to Margaret's side, a living link to the innocence of trust and family. "It's not just about me," Margaret continued, glancing at each family member, letting her words sink in. "It's about understanding each other, our fears and our hopes. Family means coming together, even when it's hard." Tears glistened in the corners of Margaret's eyes, and somewhere in the room, a family member offered a nod of acknowledgement. Just then, the doorbell chimed. The sound broke the tension, a welcoming interruption that demanded attention. Who could that be? Dave mused, shooting a quick glance toward the front door, apprehension lingering in his voice. Margaret's heart skipped. Was it a friend? A neighbor? She felt a mix of emotions brewing. Maybe this visitor could bring clarity or further upheaval. Whatever waited on the other side of the door, one thing was clear: the family needed to navigate these waters together. "Let's find out," she said, her voice steadying with resolve, sensing the winds of change. As she moved towards the door, her heart raced and her mind raced with questions. Perhaps this was a turning point, or perhaps another challenge awaited them. Would they be ready to face it? Just what surprises awaited them outside? Margaret reached for the doorknob, her hand trembling with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. She turned it slowly, half expecting something monumental to greet her on the other side. As she opened the door, the bright sunlight spilled in, momentarily blinding her. Standing there was a figure who took her breath away. It was her old friend, Clara, a woman she hadn't seen in years. Clara's wild curls caught the light, and her face wore the familiar smile that Margaret remembered from their shared adventures in their youth. "Margaret. I heard you were back in town," Clara exclaimed, pulling her into a tight embrace. The warmth enveloped Margaret like a cherished blanket, and in that moment, she felt a flood of comfort. "But, how?" she stammered, stepping back to look at Clara. "I wasn't expecting anyone. I just happened to be passing through and thought I'd drop by." "It's been way too long," Clara said, her eyes twinkling. Margaret couldn't remember the last time someone's visit had sparked such joy in her tired heart. Before Margaret could respond, she caught a glimpse of Dave fidgeting nervously in the living room behind her. She glanced back to Clara, who followed her gaze. "Uh-oh, looks like I might have stumbled into something," Clara said, a teasing lilt in her voice. "No. It's perfect timing," Margaret urged, her spirit buoyed by the unexpected visit. "Come in. We've just been talking about family." The word felt heavy on her tongue, intertwined with the unsteady emotions swirling in the room. As Clara entered, the atmosphere shifted again, this time absorbing a different kind of energy. The laughter and stories that had once filled their home began to waft back like a comforting scent from the past. "Lily, darling, why don't you go grab some lemonade from the kitchen for everyone?" Margaret asked, hoping to give her granddaughter a small task that would ease the brewing tension. Lily nodded, her eyes brightening with the new mission. "What's all this about?" Clara asked, glancing between Margaret and Dave, who stood with his arms crossed, still on guard. Margaret hesitated for a moment, then said, "We've been having a tough time, Clara. Dave is worried about me about my independence." Clara's brow furrowed with concern but then softened into understanding. "And what do you think?" she asked gently. "I think," Margaret started, feeling the weight of uncertainty lifting just a bit, "I think family should support each other. But it's hard. I feel like I'm caught between what I want and what they think is best." Before anyone could reply, Lily bounded back into the room, balancing a tray of lemonade, her small hands proud of the little accomplishment. "Here you go," she said, handing out glasses, a wide grin stretching across her face as though she had just accomplished a grand feat. Dave took a glass and sipped, the tension slowly unwinding as sweetness filled the air. But as Margaret watched them share smiles, her heart still ached. "Clara, you remember the plans we had? The ones where we promised each other we'd never let fear stop us from exploring life?" Margaret's voice wavered. "Of course," Clara said, her enthusiasm bubbling forth. "We always talked about adventures. Life is too precious to hold back." "I want that," Margaret whispered, her eyes darting to Dave and Lily, who were watching her with mixed emotions. Just as the lightness began to seep back into the conversation, another knock echoed through the room, startling them. Margaret's stomach twisted with concern. Who else could be arriving now? Maybe it's another friend. Clara laughed, trying to lift the mood further, but Margaret couldn't shake the sense that maybe this was going to be yet another pivotal moment. "Shall I go see?" Lily asked, her excitement palpable. "Let us all go together," Margaret decided, her voice steadier. As they moved toward the door, uncertainty loomed again. 3 hearts beat loudly, every one of them tangled in questions about family and the future. With each step forward, the potential of what awaited behind that door sparked curiosity, confusion, or hope. What awaited them now, as they prepared to open it? Margaret felt a flutter of nerves as she reached for the door handle again. It felt like a small threshold separating their cozy world from whatever lay beyond. She glanced at Clara, whose smile had faded into a look of curiosity and concern. Dave stood behind them, arms still crossed, masking his own unease. Lily, barely able to contain her excitement, reached for the doorknob with her tiny fingers. "I'll open it," she declared, pushing the door wide. The door creaked open to reveal a tall, broad-shouldered man. His face, familiar yet aged, sent a shock through Margaret. It was Greg, her son-in-law. His brow was furrowed, and Margaret immediately sensed his anxiety. "Margaret, I need to talk to you," he blurted, stepping forward. The moment hung heavy, the air thick with tension. Clara, who hadn't met Greg before, raised an eyebrow, and even Dave took a step closer, visibly protective. "Is everything okay?" Margaret asked, her heart racing. Greg shook his head, his eyes darting between Margaret and the others. "No, it's not. It's about Lily." Her stomach dropped. "What about Lily?" "She's been drawing some pictures at school. They're, a bit concerning," he said, struggling to find the right words. "They show her, you, and Dave some kind of scary scenes. I thought you should know." Margaret felt the color drain from her face. "Scary scenes? Like what?" "Like being trapped. Or in danger," Greg continued. "I didn't want to alarm you. But I think we should look into it." His voice softened, revealing the concern buried in his rigid demeanor. Lily's face fell, the joy of her earlier task disappearing. Margaret knelt beside her, brushing a curl behind her ear. "Honey, what have you been drawing?" she asked gently. Lily hesitated, her eyes becoming downcast. Just pretend stuff, she mumbled. It's nothing, just stories. Dave stepped forward. Children often express their fears through art. It could be just her imagination. But what if it isn't? Greg pressed, frustration creeping into his tone. What if there is something deeper going on? Kids sense things, Margaret. Especially things we try to shield them from. Margaret bit her lip, feeling the weight of her own trepidation rise again. She looked between Clara, Dave, and Greg, feeling her heart thud heavily in her chest. Maybe we should talk to her together. Understand what she sees. Yeah, but Greg's voice faltered, quickly transforming into a more vulnerable tone. I just don't want her to feel scared or alone. I want her to know she can come to us if there's anything bothering her. Margaret nodded slowly. It was a gut-wrenching reminder of her own fears. Lily is strong. We can help her, together. As if sensing the change in the atmosphere, Lily looked up, her brown eyes shimmering with innocence and confusion. Am I in trouble? She asked softly. No, sweetheart, Clara chimed in, kneeling to Lily's level. There's nothing wrong with drawing your feelings. It's your way of sharing what's in your heart. Margaret felt a flicker of hope ignite amidst the rising tide of anxiety. They could face this together, couldn't they? As they discussed how to approach Lily about the drawings, her phone buzzed on the table, jolting her from her thoughts. Curiosity spiked. Could this be news that would change everything again? The moment held a whisper of anticipation. Do you need to get that? Dave asked quietly, his concern evident as he glanced at the phone. No, it can wait, she replied, her voice firm. She was reminded that first, they needed to focus on Lily. Yet, the nagging uncertainty about the phone echoed in her mind. Maybe it was a call she would regret ignoring. As they gathered around Lily, the dialogue flowed with warmth but carried an undertone of worry, as shadows of past fears loomed. But just then, another knock rang out, sharper and more insistent this time. Margaret's heart raced again, drawn to the door as all eyes darted towards it. Who else could it be? She thought, gripping the back of a chair for support. A sense of dread filled the room. What other surprises awaited them today? Margaret's pulse quickened at the sound of the second knock. It had an urgency that set off alarms in her head. Greg shifted from foot to foot, still clearly apprehensive. Clara instinctively inched closer to Lily, her protective instincts flaring. Dave stepped forward as if to shield them all. Who do you think it is? Margaret whispered, her eyes wide with uncertainty. I don't know, Greg replied, voice low. But we should be careful. It could be someone unexpected. The knocking came again, this time interspersed with a faint, muffled voice. Margaret. Open up. Her heart sank. It was David, her estranged brother, a man with secrets as heavy as the mountains. The tension in the room came to a breaking point as fragments of their past flashed through her mind, the arguments, the accusations, the bitterness. What do we do? Clara asked, glancing at Margaret. We don't have to let him in, Dave said firmly, a scowl on his face. I mean, after all that happened. But before she could gather her thoughts, Margaret found herself crossing the room, compelled by a force she couldn't fully explain. Maybe it was a yearning for resolution, or perhaps it was a need to confront the ghosts of her family. Wait. Margaret, don't. Greg warned, but she was already at the door. Taking a deep breath, she turned the knob and opened the door wide. David stood there, looking worn and older than she remembered, a man hollowed out by regret. There was a strange softness in his eyes that caught her off guard. Margaret, he said, voice choked with emotion. I need to talk to you, please. It's about Mom. Her breath caught. Their mother had passed 2 years ago, leaving a chasm that neither of them had ever truly bridged. What could you possibly say that would make any of this better? She shot back, her voice sharp but wavering. I'm not here to fight. I want to make things right, at least for Mom's sake, he pleaded, glancing nervously at the others. Behind her, Clara shuffled, Lily tugged on Margaret's sleeve with wide, questioning eyes. Despite the whirlwind of feelings inside her, Margaret felt a fierce protectiveness for her daughter. "Lily, sweetie," she said, crouching down to meet her gaze. "Why don't you go play in the other room with Clara for a minute? Just for a moment, okay?" Lily hesitated, the unease clear on her face, but even at her young age, she seemed to understand that something important was unfolding. "Okay," she said, giving Clara a worried glance before following her. Once they were alone, Margaret's tension crackled in the air between her and David. "What do you want?" she pressed, refusing to let her guard down. There was so much pain between them, the wounds still fresh despite time's passing. "I came here because I found something of Mom's," he said, stepping forward, eyes pleading. "Something that might explain everything, what you know, what you don't." There was nothing more he could say that could transform this moment, and yet her heart raced with a mix of dread and curiosity. "What do you mean?" In that moment, Greg's voice chimed in from the back, cutting through the tension. "Margaret, are you sure this is a good idea?" Margaret's gaze flickered between Greg's concerned face and David's pleading eyes. The weight of the past hung heavy in the air like a storm cloud, and as she locked eyes with her brother, she realized that this confrontation could unearth buried truths. With a deep breath, she nodded. "Okay, let us talk, but I don't know if you can handle what comes next." David took a step closer, and just then, the phone buzzed again on the table, the sound slicing through her thoughts, demanding attention. "Or maybe there's something even more pressing we need to address first," she mumbled, gripping the edge of the table as curiosity and anxiety intermingled. What lay behind the door and the phone buzzing like a trapped bird? And would they be ready for whatever revelations awaited them? Margaret reached for the phone, her heart pounding. The buzzing felt invasive, as if it held the secrets she wasn't ready to confront. She could sense David's eyes on her, a mixture of hope and fear. The room held all its breaths, waiting for her to decide. "Just a second," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. She picked up the phone, glancing at the screen. The name that lit up sent a jolt down her spine. It was their family lawyer, Frank. "Why is he calling now?" she muttered, more to herself than anyone else. She hesitated, caught in a whirlwind between the past and the urgency splitting open in the room. With every tick of silence, the air around them became heavier. "Margaret." David's voice broke through her thoughts. "Please, let us focus on Mom. I promise it's important." She took a deep breath, resigned to the chaos unraveling in her mind. Something was pulling her toward the truth, but she couldn't ignore the weight of the phone call. Can you just wait a moment?" she said, her voice softer now. David nodded, looking like a man on the edge of a precipice. Margaret swiped the green button and lifted the phone to her ear, her other hand still squeezing the table as if it would anchor her. "Frank?" "Margaret," he said, his voice steady but laced with urgency. "I need to talk to you about your mother's estate. There are things you need to know." Her heart sank, fear and panic mixing like oil and water. "What about it? Are you alone?" he asked, his tone shifting, growing serious. "Yes," she hesitated, glancing at David. "But I have my brother here." "Is he trustworthy?" His question hung in the air, thick and potent. "What do you mean?" she asked, a chill creeping up her spine. "Margaret, I know this is difficult, but there are documents you need to read. The things you thought you knew about your mother, they might not be as they seem." "Why are you telling me this?" Her tone sharpened, the raw emotions rising like a tide. "Because I think it's important that you understand there's someone else involved." The words pierced through her, leaving her breathless. David looked at her, a mix of concern and confusion etched on his face. Margaret couldn't shake the feeling that the walls were closing in. "Someone else?" she repeated, her voice barely a whisper. "Yes, and it's vital you handle this correctly." "What do I do?" she asked, the tension in her voice now breaking like tension on a guitar string. "Meet me at the office tomorrow morning. There's much to discuss." The line went silent, leaving Margaret with the weight of his words. She hung up and turned to David, fear wrestling with stirring anger and unresolved pain. What was that about? David pressed, anxiety flickering across his face. I don't know, she admitted, trying to steady her voice. He said there's someone else involved. David's expression shifted, recognition dawning in his eyes. This is why I came here. We need to figure out what Mom was hiding. Margaret shook her head, frustration bubbling up. You don't get to decide that for me. I don't know if we can trust each other. But we have to try. David urged. The intensity of the moment echoed in her chest, the wounds of their past still fresh. They were standing on a precipice, and as Margaret looked into David's eyes, she felt both terrified and compelled to take the leap. Would she risk uncovering new truths about their mother even if it meant venturing deeper into the pain their family had buried? The phone buzzed again, a breathless reminder that they weren't done yet. She picked it up, glancing at the caller ID. Who is it now? Margaret mumbled, her heart racing. But when she saw the name, a wave of dread washed over her. It was Clara. Oh no, she whispered. What urgent news could her daughter have that added to this already tangled mess? And would they be able to piece together the family they once knew before it was too late? Margaret's hands trembled as she stared at the caller ID. Clara's name illuminated the screen, yet the dread coiling in her gut overshadowed any maternal instinct she had. She thought about what Clara might have seen or sensed. It was a tightrope walk between worry and hope. It's Clara, she breathed out to David, who leaned closer, eyebrows knitting together. Pick it up, he urged, his voice low and serious. Taking a deep breath, Margaret pressed the green call button. Clara? What's wrong? Her voice wasn't as steady as she wished it could be, but it was enough to let her daughter know she was there, ready to listen. Mom, you won't believe this, Clara's voice came out in a rushed whisper, tinged with anxiety. I just saw Grandma's car parked at the old store on Maple Street. The one where she used to take us for ice cream. What? Margaret's heart dropped. The old store was miles away, and as far as she knew, her mother hadn't driven in years. Are you sure? Is she okay? I think she was with someone, Clara continued, her tone breathless. I didn't recognize the car, but I think it was a man. He looked shady, Mom. A knot twisted in Margaret's stomach. Why were you there? And how do you know it's her car? She felt her pulse quicken, her mind racing with images that didn't paint a comforting picture. I was just passing by on my way home, and I noticed the car. It's the same faded green one she used to drive. Then I saw them through the window. It didn't look good. David's eyes widened, igniting a flicker of shared panic between them. We need to go check on her, he said, urgency spilling into his words. Where are you now? Margaret asked Clara, her mind spinning with worry. I'm parked across the street, but I think the man is leaving. He doesn't look right, Mom. You have to hurry. Stay put. Margaret barked. We're on our way. She hung up the phone, her heart thundering in her chest. Grab your things, she commanded David, already moving toward the door. We have to find her. Now. He was right behind her, a mix of anxiety and determination in his stride. What if she's in trouble? He asked, concern threading through his voice. I don't care. She shot back, a rare spark of anger flaring in her. We can't just sit here while she's out there. If Frank knew something, if David knew something, what if that man is involved? We need answers. They slid into the car, and with every second that passed, the need to reach Clara before something happened became all-consuming. The tires screeched as Margaret turned down the familiar roads, the air thick with tension. The unease wrapped tighter around them, and the silence filled with unspoken fears. Just when she thought she could let the weight of the world off her shoulders, the fear that had been building began to press back in. What are we going to say to her? David asked, glancing sideways. We'll figure it out when we get there, she replied defiantly, gripping the steering wheel harder. As they reached Maple Street, fear collided with urgency. The store came into view, the fading paint and peeling signs reflecting memories of untainted joy. But instead of warmth, Margaret felt only dread. A car sat parked awkwardly, and Clara was leaning against it, scanning the street. Margaret's eyes honed in on the man who stood beside her daughter, a stranger, ominous and watchful. "Get out!" she shouted at David, her voice ringing loud and desperate. They rushed towards Clara, but something in that man's posture stopped them cold. "Mom!" Clara's voice was nearly fractured. "What are you doing?" Margaret exclaimed, fear lacing her words. But as they closed the distance, the man shifted toward Clara, his eyes darting between the two of them. It was a moment that could spiral. Uncertainty thickened the air. "Margaret, hold on!" David yelled as he took a step forward, ready to intercede. Everything would change in an instant, but for Margaret, it felt like an eternity resting on the edge of a question. Why was he here, and what did he want with her family? Just as the tension reached its peak, a startling sound broke. Through the air, a sharp crack that reverberated through Margaret's very core. And then, the man turned and rushed away, disappearing down a darkened alley. "What just happened?" she gasped, confusion flickering in her eyes. "Mom, I think we need to talk. There's more to this than we realized," Clara said, her voice trembling. What could her daughter possibly mean? Margaret's pulse raced as the mystery only deepened, leading them into a labyrinth of secrets they were now forced to navigate together. And so she wondered, was this the beginning of the end or a path toward the truth? Margaret's heart raced, a cacophony of alarm bells ringing in her mind. She stood frozen, her instincts on high alert, trying to piece together the scene before her. The instinctive fear she felt in that moment was too potent to ignore. Clara moved closer to her mom, eyes wide and searching. Margaret could see the worry etched deep into her daughter's features. "Clara, what did you see?" Margaret pressed, her voice urgent but low, trying to keep the oxygen in the air from feeling too heavy. "What were you doing here alone?" "I saw him grab her by the arm," Clara's voice cracked. "I knew something was wrong. He was blocking her way, and she looked scared, Mom. I thought I had to do something." David shifted beside Margaret, his face twisted in tension, ready to leap into action if necessary. "Where did he go?" he asked, scanning the alley like a hawk. "We need to figure out if your mom is okay." Before Clara could answer, shouts echoed from the other side of the street. Margaret's stomach dropped. Another man had come into view, yelling angrily. "Get back here. I'm not done with you," he shouted, voice laced with desperation. Margaret recognized that voice. Frank. She pushed ahead through the instinctive panic in her gut. "Stay close, both of you," Margaret urged, her eyes narrowing on the men as she tried to understand the scene unfolding. Frank stormed forward, and in that moment, clarity hit Margaret with the force of a freight train. Frank wasn't just any man. Clara's mention of a shady figure now held a different weight. Frank, Clara's father, seemed to be chasing someone he had a vendetta against. All those feelings Margaret had bottled up about him returned in waves. He loomed larger than life, angry and frantic like a caged animal, clamoring to burst free. "What is going on here?" Margaret demanded, drawing the tension tightly. He spun around at the sound of her voice, his expression transforming from rage to shock. "Margaret, what are you doing here?" His voice was layered with confusion and something darker that sent shivers down her spine. "Why were you chasing that man?" she repeated, edging into the conversation, not letting him sidestep the issue. Her heart was racing, and the words poured out fueled by the desperation of parental instinct. "I thought he was taking your mother," Frank blurted out, hands raised in defensive surrender. "But the way he said your mother felt so wrong. Why would he take her?" Margaret shot back, more bewildered than ever. "What do you know?" "Just listen." Frank's voice trembled, an unusual crack that resembled fear. "I had a feeling something wasn't right. I've seen him around, lurking. I needed to know if she was safe." "Safe from whom?" David interjected, pulling himself between Clara and Frank as if to shield them. Margaret suddenly felt the stark chill of realization wash over her. You were supposed to keep her safe, Frank. You're her son-in-law. Why wasn't she with you? What is going on in this family? Amidst the chaos, Clara stepped forward, her spirit relentless. You're both missing something. Mom, there's a reason I came here. Grandma warned me. Warned you? Margaret blinked, the pieces of a crumbling puzzle mixing in her mind. What did she say? Something about a man you can't trust and a secret, Clara whispered, her voice shaking. Sudden fear reflected in Margaret's eyes. If Clara had been alerted, did that mean something deeper was buried? Before she could voice another thought, the rumble of Clara's car door interrupted them, drawing their collective attention. A figure emerged, causing the air to stiffen once again. Clara's face blanched. No, not now, Margaret. A frantic call echoed behind them. A chilling recognition gripped Margaret's throat. The man from the alley. As he approached, the chatter and chaos around them faded, all that remained was the sharp clarity of 1,000 questions begging for answers. Get back. David warned, stepping in front of Margaret, fists clenched, ready to protect. What do you want? Margaret's voice wavered but held a steely edge, the kind that emanated from a mother bear. Defending her cubs. All at once, the atmosphere seemed to shift, like an impending storm ready to unleash. Margaret. Clara, the man's voice was calm, almost eerily soothing. We need to talk about your mother and those secrets she's kept from you. Every muscle in Margaret's body tensed. It felt like the ground had shifted under them, the very foundation of their lives threatening to unravel. Could it be true? What secrets? What had they buried so deep that they'd now come roaring back to the surface? And suddenly, Margaret understood, as panic settled over her like heavy fog. The truth was out there, more dangerous than anything they had imagined. Are you ready for the answers, Margaret? His gaze locked onto hers, leaving her teetering at the edge of a precipice that threatened to swallow her whole. What had he meant? Could they really handle what lay ahead? Margaret's breath quickened, and she felt the world narrow down to that one moment, the man's eyes boring into hers. They were impossibly calm, terrifyingly steady. Secrets, she echoed, something twisted in her chest. Clara took a shaky step back, her face pallid, the innocence she wore just moments ago seemed to drain away. Mom, we can't listen to him. This isn't right. Her voice trembled. But now it was too late. The man's presence felt like a thundercloud eclipsing the sun, heavy with untold stories and hidden dangers. Margaret's head spun, collecting threads of thoughts. What could her mother have kept hidden? Listen, just tell us what you know, David said, his eyes darting between Margaret, Clara, and the approaching figure. Whatever it is, we can handle it. The man moved closer, his body casting an ominous shadow. I've been watching your mother, Margaret. She has something that doesn't belong to her, something that could tear this family apart. Stop. Frank shouted from behind them, panic rising in his throat. You need to go. Now. Margaret felt the cords of logic strain against the tide of emotion surging inside her. No. Frank, this is our chance to understand. She glanced back at David and Clara, searching for belief in their eyes, but all she saw were fear and uncertainty. But at what cost? David urged, stepping forward, shielding Clara protectively. We need to think. If he's dangerous? The man's lips curled into a thin smile, yet his eyes revealed nothing. Oh, I'm only a messenger. You'll find the danger lies deeper than you imagine. Margaret clenched her fists, desperate to regain control. My mother, what about her? Where does she fit into this? Your mother isn't who you think she is. That's the secret. The man took a breath before continuing, each word measured, as if savoring the chaos he stirred. She's tied to something bigger. It's been hidden for years, and now it's all coming to a head. Clara's eyes darted between them. What do you mean, bigger? She's just Grandma. The man shook his head slightly, dismissing Clara's words. Simple is a luxury, child. Sometimes, you need to peel back layers to find the truth. Your reality is fragile, and one wrong move could shatter it entirely. Margaret's heart sank. What could be so terrible? What boundary had her mother crossed? She could feel the weight of countless possibilities pressing down on her, threatening to engulf her. A rustle broke the tension. This time, it was coming from behind the alley, a back door flung open. Margaret. Her mother emerged, wild-eyed and disheveled, a ghost of her usual self. Get away from them! She shouted, rushing toward them, her voice echoing a mix of desperation and authority. Frank bolted toward her, urgency lining his features. Evelyn, no. The man stepped back, a shadow of amusement touching his lips. I guess the cat's out of the bag. Margaret's stomach dropped. Mom? Margaret, her mother gasped for breath, eyes wide as she glanced at the man. You shouldn't have come here. The air crackled as everything hung in uncertain suspension. What had her mother done? All at once, clarity hit Margaret like a shockwave. The past, the secrets, it all seemed entangled in a single moment that threatened to tear apart their family. Mom, Margaret finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. What is happening? Evelyn looked from Margaret to Clara, then finally to the man. It's time you know the truth, she said slowly, her voice trembling with the weight of the revelation. Margaret felt her heart pounding with a mix of fear and urgency. Could they handle the truth? Could their family survive the storm that had silently brewed all these years? As her mother's words hung in the air, Margaret realized she stood at the brink of something monumental. All eyes were on her, waiting for her to make a decision. Would she be able to confront what lay ahead? Or would the truths unleashed tear them further apart? Mom, where do we even start? Margaret whispered, and in that moment, they all felt the world shift once more, cracking open as the next chapter loomed on the horizon, waiting to be written. The air was thick with tension as Evelyn stepped into the light, her voice a shaky whisper. I didn't want you to find out this way. But the truth, it can't stay buried any longer. Margaret felt the weight of her mother's words settle like heavy stones in her heart. What have you been hiding? She asked, her voice trembling but resolute. Everything. There were choices I made for you all, choices that came with consequences, Evelyn replied, her eyes scanning the gathered family. Mom, just tell us. Clara urged, her youthful face contorted in confusion. We can handle it. Just speak. Evelyn inhaled deeply, collecting the fragments of courage she needed for this moment. Your father, he wasn't just an ordinary man. He was involved in something bigger, something dangerous. I thought I was protecting you by keeping it all a secret. Margaret's heart twisted at the mention of her father. What do you mean dangerous? She pressed, desperate for answers. Evelyn's voice quavered as she forged ahead. There were organizations, people I didn't want you to know about. They were after him, and by extension, they were after us. I thought hiding would keep you safe, but it turned us into shadows, always running, always afraid. David stepped forward, his expression a mix of anger and disbelief. And you thought robbing us of our normal lives was for our protection? Please, Evelyn said, desperation coloring her tone, I did what I thought was best. I wanted you to have a life free from that kind of fear. But now, it has come crashing back. The man watched the exchange with a knowing gaze, his presence a reminder of unresolved truths. You're right, Evelyn. The past has a way of finding you. Margaret's pulse quickened. What do you want with my mom? She demanded, her body instinctively tensing. I'm not her enemy, he said, raising his hands gently, palms open like a peace offering. But I'm here to ensure she and you don't get caught in the fallout of what's coming. Coming? Margaret echoed, barely able to hold herself steady as the pieces of a dark puzzle began falling into place. What do you mean? Those who seek power never truly let it go, the man stated, his eyes searching the group. Your family has something they want, a legacy tied to your father that he left behind. And if they find out you hold the key, Evelyn closed her eyes, pain flashing across her features. I never wanted any of this for you. That's why I kept silent. And I see now that it didn't work. Margaret turned to Clara, who had tears glistening in her eyes. We could lose everything, Mom. Why didn't you trust us to help? A hollow silence lingered in the air, suffocating, heavy with loss. Her mother took a step forward, vulnerability cracking through her stern resolve. I thought I was protecting our family. But now, it seems I've only put you in danger. I see that I robbed you of your sense of safety through my lies. David's shoulders dipped, his anger giving way to a fragile thread of understanding. You weren't protecting us, Mom. You were shutting us out, he said softly, his voice breaking. We could have faced this together. I know, Evelyn replied, tears spilling down her cheeks. But now it's time we face it. Not just the truth, but the danger that lurks in the shadows. The quiet resolve that had filled Margaret's heart turned into a flame of determination. They needed to take back their power, to reclaim their story. So, what do we do? She asked, her voice steady but her heart racing. We prepare, the man said, the gravity of his tone underscoring the seriousness of their situation. And we protect each other. You cannot let past shadows dictate your future. Margaret exchanged glances with Clara and David, feeling a growing sense of unity and purpose building among them. We're family. We'll face whatever comes, together. Yes. Clara spoke up, her small voice filled with unexpected strength. I'm not afraid if you're all with me. Evelyn nodded, hope illuminating her features. We'll rewrite our story. No more secrets, no more hiding. The man finally stepped back, giving them space, respecting their moment. You have the power to decide how this ends. Will you stand together? As they gathered close, Margaret felt warmth radiating between them. This family, once fractured, now felt unbreakable. They would reclaim their narrative, wield their own power, and face the coming storm with unwavering resolve. Let us do this, Margaret said, tears of both pain and joy blurring her vision as she held her family tight. No more holding back. We'll unlock the doors to our future. The tension that had suffocated them transformed into a fierce love igniting in their hearts. Standing together, they stepped into the unknown, ready to face whatever challenges awaited them together. And in that moment, Margaret felt a profound sense of freedom. You need to subscribe now to be a part of these incredible stories. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait not even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformation. Your reaction means the world, so leave a like now to feed the algorithm and comment your feelings about this ending.